Hello class. Alright, this is the last lesson in the international trade section of the class. This one's on foreign exchange markets, and it's really in two pieces. The first piece is on fixed and flexible exchange rates, and the second piece is a more esoteric piece about how complicated monetary policy is in a world of globalization. So we'll get to that second. But first, fixed and flexible exchange rates. There are two types of exchange rates, fixed and flexible. A fixed rate is simply a promise or promises by governments to exchange their currencies for fixed amounts with their trading partners. So for an exchange rate to be fixed, it requires some agreement between countries. Of course, those agreements can be broken, and when they do, chaos ensues, and usually after the dust settles, a new agreement is established, but always at some different exchange rate. So the currency might be devalued or revalued upward. Flexible exchange rates, on the other hand, have no governmental promise. In their case, the value of the currency is set simply by supply and demand. So flexible exchange rates can move up and down daily or hourly or really moment by moment. But fixed exchange rates are fixed until some crisis occurs, and then there's a huge move, and then a new fixed exchange rate is set. Alright, so let's just look at how flexible exchange rates could be illustrated with supply and demand. So first you have to think about, on this price axis, how are we going to price dollars? And so the way we do it is we price dollars in some other currency. In this particular example, it's in euros. So this here is the euro price of US dollars, and this would be the demand curve for US dollars. When the euro price of US dollars is really high, people won't buy very many dollars because they're expensive. On the other hand, if the euro price of US dollars was really low, people would buy lots of them. So this demand curve for dollars, bought and sold in euros, would represent foreign nationals who need dollars for U.S. purchases, or maybe they want to invest in the U.S. economy and they would need dollars for that. So these are just people who need dollars and are willing to pay for them. In this particular way I've set it up, they're going to pay in euros. There would also be a supply curve of U.S. dollars, and these people would be holders of dollars, probably Americans, but holders of dollars who wish to sell them for purchases outside the U.S. or for investments outside the U.S. So these are people who are holding dollars who are eager to sell them, and they would sell them at some euro price. Alright, so there would be some equilibrium established, just like we did in the first week or two of our class. Now, I did look it up. At the moment, the current price of US dollar is about 0.83 euros. So I'm making this video in about mid-April 2021, and at this moment it's about 0.83 euro. Alright, so let's imagine that we tried some different kinds of monetary policy. So suppose in the United States that we began to engage in tighter monetary policy. So we would restrict the supply curve of US dollars, so it would shift back this way. Hope you could see that that would make the price of US dollars go up in terms of euros. Or to put in the kind of ways that you normally hear it in the press, the dollar would get stronger because it would take more euros to buy a dollar. But of course the number of dollars that are available would be less. Similarly, suppose we engaged in some kind of increase in the demand curve for dollars. So I'm trying to think what that might be. What if the U.S. economy for some reason just gets really, really hot compared to other economies across the globe, and people get interested in making investments in the United States because the rate of return is higher there? So then the demand curve for US dollars would go up. That is, people would want to buy those dollars so that they would have an opportunity to invest in the United States. Again, that would make the price of dollars go up in terms of euros, or the way most people would say it, the dollar would get stronger, but now there would be more dollars available, not less. Alright, so then let's see. Suppose we had monetary expansion, that is, the Fed moved to expand the money supply in the United States for one of those Keynesian reasons. That should drive the value of the dollar lower, or the value of the dollar would be devaluated, and there would be lots of dollars in the marketplace. So I hope you can see, oh yeah, I forgot this slide here. So if we did devalue the dollar, there could be ramifications on the demand curve side also. I don't want to make it too complicated, but if people begin to expect that the U.S. Federal Reserve is going to follow loose monetary policy for a long time, nobody would want to hold dollars very much because they would fear inflation, and it could be that the demand curve for dollars might also fall, driving its price even lower. I don't mean to make it too complicated. I'm just trying to point out that when you have flexible exchange rates, there could be many, many reasons that people might decide to buy or sell dollars. Now, let's switch over to fixed exchange rates. Fixed exchange rates on the surface seem much simpler. You have a government promise to exchange your currency for some other currency at some agreed upon rate. So we have some fixed exchange rate here. Let's assume that the fixed exchange rate happens to coincide with equilibrium at the moment. Now let's do something to upset equilibrium. I know. Let's have a fixed exchange rate and let's engage in some kind of expansionary monetary policy. So the supply curve would shift out to the right. The value of the dollar should fall, but it can't because it's fixed. So the government's promising to pay at this rate. So what would happen is the quantity supplied of dollars would be way out here. This isn't equilibrium anymore. This is instead just the quantity demanded. And from here to here is a surplus of dollars. Now, in order to maintain this fixed rate, the government, the U.S. government, and also the foreign government has agreed to buy up these dollars, in this case with euros. So notice that we've expanded the money supply through some monetary policy, but at the same time we're buying up dollars and parking them in vaults, buying them up with our stored euros, right, to maintain this fixed exchange rate. Now that's going to come back later in another slide. One more time now. If the Fed increases the money supply, that shifts the supply curve out, but because of the fixed exchange rate, the value of the dollar can't fall, and somebody, probably government officials in the Treasury, would then have to buy up dollars. Essentially, these dollars that were expanded would have to buy them up with their stored euros. Now, let's go the other way. Suppose we try to contract the money supply in the United States, but we have a fixed exchange rate agreement. The price of dollars should rise, but it can't because of this fixed agreement. So this thing over here would be the new quantity supplied. This isn't equilibrium anymore because this doesn't exist. This would then be just the quantity demanded. Can you see that off the demand curve? And then this distance right here is now, let's see, this is the quantity demanded, this is the quantity supplied. We have a shortage of dollars, or a surplus of euros if you think about it the other way. So we're going to buy up euros with dollars. Now keep in mind that we contracted dollars here, which moved that supply curve back to the left, and now we're going to buy up all these unwanted euros with dollars. So this is going to expand the money supply here because we've got to use dollars to buy up all these euros. It's really important. I have another slide summarizing it in a moment. So basically, under fixed exchange rates, monetary policy of all trading countries are tied together. They can't engage in independent monetary policy because if they did, all that would happen is that dollars would flow in or flow out, and because of the promise, the fixed promise, they would have to buy up all those extra dollars or sell off dollars that they are keeping out of circulation. On the other hand, under flexible exchange rates, that doesn't happen. Under flexible exchange rates, monetary policies can be different, and if one country decides to debase its currency, I'm kind of on my soapbox a little bit, but if one country decides to debase its currency or cheapen its currency, it's simply reflected in a lower exchange rate. That can't happen up here because the exchange rates are fixed. Now I want to take a moment and talk about forward market arbitrage. This is a really cool thing. It sounds very, very complicated, but I think with this little teaching tool that I found in an old book called Around the Lake, I think it'll be easy for you to see what forward market arbitrage is. So let's set this little thing up. Oh yeah, first we need these formulas. These formulas that you've seen over and over again. The future value is equal to the present value times 1 plus, in this case, the interest rate raised to the number of years out. But you could write it in terms of present value, right? Just by dividing both sides by this. The present value is equal to the future value divided by 1 plus the interest rate raised to the number of years out. In this little example I'm going to use, we're not going to go out more than 1 year, so years is just going to be 1, and that makes the math really easy. Okay, so here's the setup. So we have some lake. This is the best clip art I could find for some lake. Now over here is the United States, or we can just call this the home country at the moment, and over here is the foreign country on the other side of the lake. Then down here, this is today, which we call the spot market, right? And up here, this is 1 year from now, the future, which we call the futures market. Alright, now let's put in some numbers so that this thing will be consistent. Let's assume, let's see, I think I changed it to the United States and the EU, that's okay. Now let's assume an interest rate, let's see, I started down here. So let's assume that the spot exchange rate is $1 exchanges for 0.8 euro. Alright, just an exchange rate. We have flexible exchange rates in this example, and this is the current exchange rate. And let's assume that the interest rate in the United States is 5%, and the interest rate in the EU is also 5%. And 1 year from now, the exchange rate is no different. That is, you could buy a futures contract to exchange dollars for euros 1 year from now, and it would be the same contract as exchange dollars for euros in the spot market. So this example is logically consistent. I will show you. Let's imagine this is you in the United States. It's today, right? We're down in this corner. This is present day. You're in the United States. And let's say you have $100 and you're trying to figure out what to do with it for a year. Well, one thing to do is to park it in a U.S. bank at 5% interest, and 1 year from now, based on that formula, you would have $105. So that's one option, to take your $100 and deposit it in a U.S. bank. Your other option in a global economy is to take your $100, exchange it into euros. So since $1 makes 0.8 euros, $100 would exchange for 80 euros. Then take those 80 euros and deposit them in a European bank at 5% interest. So 80 euros at 5% interest 1 year from now, you would have 84 of them. Okay? And then take those 84 euros 1 year from now and exchange them back into dollars, right? And this is the predicted exchange rate in the future. So dividing this number by 0.8 to get it back into dollars, you would find out that you would have exactly $105. So it doesn't matter in the situation I've set up here. It doesn't matter. You could invest your money in the United States, or you can convert it into euros and invest it in the EU and then convert it back into dollars later. It doesn't matter. It's the same in both cases. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Let's say that the Federal Reserve in the United States takes action to lower the interest rate in the United States. Right? Come on, we do that all the time. Alright, so let's move this interest rate to 4%. So now this person in the United States with $100 today tries to invest it in the United States. They won't get $105. Instead, they'll get only $104. Of course, going the other way around, they could still get $105. So what do you suppose people will do? This is a logical inconsistency. People won't be eager to park their money in the United States because it's better to park it over here and convert it back into dollars later. So what will end up happening is that there will begin a flow, we call it a flow around the lake, in this direction. Here, I'll show you. So let's see, this $100 will turn into 80 euro, and then that will become in 1 year from now 84 euro, a promise for 84 euros 1 year from now, which you can then convert back into dollars in some forward contract, and you would have $105. So that's obviously superior to going this way. But it won't stop there. You could then take that $105, borrow against it in the United States, right, at 4% interest. If you had $105, use your formula, future value, present value formula. If you had a promise for $105 1 year from now, you could use that as collateral to borrow against it today at 4% interest. You could borrow $196. Work out the math and you'll see. You started with $100 and you just kind of went around the lake. Might have, with modern computers, that would have only taken you maybe a second, and your $100 is now $100.96, which you could then use to buy more euros, right? And that would get you to 80.77 euros, which you could then invest in the foreign bank, and you would get a promise. You'd get a document that says 1 year from now this document's worth $84.81. Then you would take this document, it's not really euros, it's just a promise to pay you euros in a year, sign it over to this futures market where they could cash it in 1 year from now, and they're in the business of giving out money today for something that's going to have value a year from now. So you take this number, divide it by 0.8, and you would find that you would have $106.01. Then what would you do? You would borrow against that, right? Borrow against that, and then you would have $101.93. Can you see, every time you go around the lake, you're getting a little bit richer, and this thing would just go on and on and on. It's a logical inconsistency. It's a kind of an arbitrage, right? So investors will take advantage of this logical inconsistency, and they will do it as long as they can make money doing it. Now, it can't go on forever because there's no free lunch. So what's going to happen? Here's what happens. Let me see if I can get this to clear. What will happen is these people in the United States flood this spot market. So think about what's happening in the lobby of this exchange house right here. There's hundreds, probably thousands of people all holding dollars who want to buy euros. They're selling dollars in an effort to buy euros. So that'll weaken the dollar. So what will happen is, let me see if I can get to it. I got too many slides here. What will happen is the dollar will weaken, so instead of a dollar buying 0.8 euros, it will start to buy only 0.79 euros and then 0.78 euros and so forth, because this market is flooded with dollars and everyone's trying to buy euros. So euros will get stronger, dollars will get weaker. Now, think about what's happening in the lobby over here. What's going on over here, since we're going this way, is the lobby of the foreign bank is really crowded with people who all want to make deposits. Nobody's trying to borrow money. Everybody wants to deposit money. So the lobby is awash with people who are holding euros who want to make deposits. Now you might know that a bank makes its living by not just taking in deposits but also making loans. And the problem here is there are lots of deposits but no loans are being made. So there'd be pressure on this interest rate to drive this interest rate down, to discourage deposits and encourage loans. Now what's happening in this market up here? Up here, this lobby is full of people who have promissory notes in the future to pay out euros, and what they want to sell that thing for dollars. They want a promissory note in dollars, not in euros. So what will happen is that the value of the euro will fall, and it'll take more euros to buy a dollar than it used to. And then over here, what will happen in the U.S. bank market is the bank's lobby in the United States is full of people who are trying to borrow money because we're going this way. Everybody wants to borrow. Nobody wants to make a deposit. So borrowing is too attractive, so that will cause the interest rate in the United States to rise. And as this thing goes round and round and round, this interest rate will creep up, this interest rate will creep down, the spot value of the dollar will get weaker, and the forward value of the dollar will get stronger, until finally all of these things will come back into equilibrium. Alright, where's my next slide? So this around the lake action will continue until interest rates and exchange rates fall back into consistency. With globalization, one country cannot move, so this is the conclusion. With globalization, one country cannot move its interest rate without affecting the exchange rates or interest rates in all the other countries. So if you have fixed exchange rates, this is going to happen all the time. Alright? Even with flexible exchange rates, all those things will move, right? They will all adjust. So think about it. If we went backwards, if the let's back up for just a second if I can do it. Remember, in the beginning the interest rate was 5%. Come on. Come on, move. Here. So the U.S. interest rate was 5%, and the Fed took action to lower it. And when they did, they caused this logical inconsistency, and it put pressure. Remember, when it was 4%, it began to creep up to 4.1%, 4.2%, 4.3%, and at the same time, this interest rate over here began to creep down. So all of the interest rates and the exchange rates are tied together because of this requirement of logical consistency. See how the Fed tried to move the interest rate to 4%, but now it's slowly going to creep back up. Does this look like anything you've seen before? Well, yeah, you might have forgotten, but a few weeks ago we did something very similar to this when we talked about what happens when the government tries to put a tariff on something. And I found those old slides and I slid them in here. You might remember, this is like 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had foreign steel and we had domestic steel, and the domestic steel industry lobbies the government to protect them from foreign steel. So they put a tariff on foreign steel, which moves the supply curve for foreign steel back this way and causes the demand curve for domestic steel to shift out to the right. If you just don't look any farther than that, this looks like a sweet deal for domestic steel because their price is higher and their sales have gone up. And we don't care what happens to, I mean, I care, but people in general don't care what happens to the owners of foreign steel, and so they're worse off. But what's not thought out completely is all the other impacts this has on the economy. So obviously this higher price of domestic steel and the higher price of foreign steel, no matter which you buy, steel will be more expensive now. It's going to impact the market for domestic automobiles that must purchase steel to produce them. So the supply curve for domestic automobiles will shift back to the left, making domestic automobiles more expensive. And of course, as domestic automobiles are more expensive, the demand curve for foreign cars will shift out to the right. And then the demand curve for used cars, since now all new cars are more expensive than before, the demand curve for used cars will shift out to the right. But at the same time, the supply curve will shift back to the left. And then it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So this was a lesson that I gave you a few weeks ago to try to impress upon you this idea that all the markets are related, not just in microeconomics, which is where this lesson was, but also in macroeconomics in terms of interest rates and exchange rates. So let's see. In summary, the foreign exchange market is just like any other market. It looks maybe more complicated, but it's not. The price or exchange rate is set by supply and demand under flexible exchange rates, and is set by government promises under fixed exchange rates. A fixed exchange rate is similar to fixing the price of any good. So if the government fixed the price of, say, oil or whatever, then when the market goes out of equilibrium, there would be shortages or surpluses of it, and that's exactly what happens when the government tries to fix the price of its currency relative to another. Okay, so that's the end of this lesson, and that actually is the last lesson in international trade. All right, everybody, hope you found that helpful.